Okay, we're going to get started. I wanted to welcome you all to the Office of the State Treasurer webinar about the Delaware EARNS program, which officially launched July 1. Treasurer Davis and Program Director Ted Griffith are going to take you through a presentation, which should last about 25 to 30 minutes. And then there will be an opportunity for Q&A. To submit a question, you would click on the Q&A button, which for most people is on the bottom toolbar to your right, and you'll be able to enter a question. They will address all questions following the presentation. We will be recording this session, so if for some reason you need to jump off or you want to refer to it later, you will have access to it. This will be sent around. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Treasurer Davis to get us started.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you. I'm Colleen Davis, your state treasurer. I'm joined by EARNS Program Director Ted Griffith, as Joanna mentioned, and we're really excited to be with you today. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us. We're excited to tell you about EARNS because after years of work, we're ready to launch. And this is a new retirement savings plan for private sector workers who don't have access to savings through their jobs right now. Before we get into some of the details, I just want to speak to the larger significance of Delaware EARNS, why personally this program is such a priority and truly so meaningful to me. Growing up in Sussex County, I saw firsthand the hardships that families can face. My own parents struggled financially after my father's company fell victim to fraud. And that experience is what makes me today committed to improving financial security and resilience for both workers and small businesses that employ them. What Delaware EARNS is ultimately about is making sure that no one is denied a dignified, secure retirement. So why is Delaware EARNS needed? Because we are truly in a retirement crisis, not just here in Delaware, but nationally. Currently, more than 70% of Americans are worried that they don't have enough for retirement. And nearly half of Americans aged 55 and over have no savings at all. For Black and Brown workers, that financial challenge is especially profound. A study done several years ago found that more than 60% of households of color in Wilmington live in what's known as a liquid asset poverty. There's a dire situation where households don't have enough savings to cover some of the basic expenses for even a short period or a few months if their income were to stop due to job loss, illness, or other emergency. We know that the main drivers of this problem are the lack of access to retirement plans. Almost 40% of Delawareans in the private sector workforce, or nearly 150,000 workers, have no access to a workplace retirement plan. But if we give access to a plan through payroll like Delaware EARNS, workers are 15 times more likely to save. So what is Delaware EARNS and how will it help, right? EARNS is a retirement savings program. It's sponsored by my office for private sector workers without workplace plans. The program will create a pathway to economic security and financial empowerment for workers. It will let businesses offer that competitive benefit at no cost to that employer. And ultimately, it'll save taxpayers millions and potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in the future. I want to turn it over to Ted now. We look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation. And again, I just want to thank you so much for being with us today. Ted.
Thank you so much, Treasurer Davis. And again, my name is Ted Griffith. I'm the program director for Delaware EARNS. And as the treasurer explained, Delaware EARNS is a brand new retirement savings program sponsored by the Office of the State Treasurer for private sector workers who lack access to retirement savings through their jobs. Through the balance of the presentation, I'm going to take you through the details of the program and really looking at the program from the standpoint of employers who in certain cases are mandated to facilitate the program, and then the voluntary participants, the employees, the savers, who are also going to be involved in the program and benefit from it. In terms of employers, it is important to realize that for a certain group of employers that meet the criteria that you can see there on the screen, the 3 criteria, they are required to facilitate this program. So if you're a Delaware employer, for profit or nonprofit, and you have 5 or more W-2 Delaware employees, full or part-time the employees can be, and you don't offer a qualified retirement plan, and you've been in business for 6 months, you will be required to facilitate Delaware EARNS. But the great thing, as Treasurer Davis mentioned, for employers, there is no cost to employers for facilitating this program. Again, no cost to employers for facilitating this program. From the employee standpoint, the program is entirely voluntary, but it's voluntary on an opt-out basis. And what I mean by that is workers will be automatically enrolled into the program, and unless they take any action, a default contribution for their benefit, 5% of the gross paycheck, will be taken and be invested in their Roth IRA for their benefit. Again, unless they opt out, and they can opt out or opt back in at any time. We sometimes do get questions about the automatic enrollment aspect of this program. Know that automatic enrollment with retirement plans has emerged as really the best thinking, the best practice for really making sure, back to what Treasurer Davis was saying about the nature of the problem, to really kind of make a dent in the retirement savings crisis. You do need to kind of give a nudge to savers to join the program. So that's why we have the automatic enrollment. From the standpoint of employers who may or may not be required to facilitate the program, we often get questions about, well, you know, what kind of retirement plan would qualify me for an exemption from EARNS? And as you can see the list up here, it's the standard list of tax advantage qualified retirement plans that I think many of us may be familiar with, starting with the 401k, but including various other plans, as you can see there. And know that this list is available on the website, earnsdelaware.com. So if you have any questions about, you know, does my plan qualify me to my business to be exempt, please just go to the website. And while we're on the topic of private sector retirement plans, it is important for me to point out that Delaware EARNS in no way is meant to supplant the great private sector programs that are out there. If you're an employer that currently has a 401k, a 403b, what have you, please keep those in place. That it's wonderful that you're helping employees. That's exactly the overarching goal of this program, is to just promote retirement savings for everyone. So it's important for us to note that. There are 3 aspects of the EARNS program that I do want to highlight for you, just kind of emphasize. As I mentioned, it is a voluntary program, but it's on an opt-out basis. So workers, savers will be automatically enrolled in the program. And again, that's just to promote participation. But if somebody needs to, we recognize some workers definitely will need to. They're free to opt out and free to opt back in at any time, completely voluntary at the employee level. And I'm sure all of you often hear the phrase public-private partnership. In this case, it is truly an extraordinarily public-private partnership that we're very proud of. What I mean by that is all of you, employers, savers, the general public, can have confidence in the EARNS program because it is overseen by the Office of the State Treasurer. Further, we have an independent board made up of community leaders and high-level government officials who are providing additional oversight for the program. So great oversight. As you might imagine, the Office of the State Treasurer has deep experience in overseeing hundreds of millions, really billions of dollars in public investments. And then the private sector partner is outstanding. It's a company called Vestwell. They're the ones that set up the website, do all the record keeping, keep track of all the transactions. And that company is actually the leader in this type of state IRA program. Currently, there are 10 states, including Delaware, that have these so-called auto IRAs or automatic statewide IRAs up and running. Our provider, the private sector company Vestwell, is the administrator for 8 of those 10 programs. So as you can see, they've emerged really as the leader within this niche. And just for interest, I'll mention that many of our neighbors already have this program in place. Maryland has a similar program to Delaware EARNS that's been up and running for a while. Likewise, Virginia and actually New Jersey has launched a program just simultaneously with us starting July 1. So that's important to point out. And then the third thing to mention, and we never miss an opportunity to do this, there is no cost to employers for facilitating the EARNS program. So again, no cost, no fees to the employer. Of course, I'm sure everyone is curious about the timetable for this. 2024 is really the year in which EARNS comes to fruition. The work that the Treasurer's Office has done for many years is coming to fruition this year. Back in the spring, we went through the regulatory process, and our final regulations were posted publicly at the beginning of May. It's also important to point out, in the spring of this year, we did a pilot, a test run, if you will, involving 12 employers up and down the state, all sorts of different businesses. That went extremely well and made us feel like we had the wind at our backs and very confident as we opened for employer registration on July 1. So the program, a little more than 2 weeks, the program has been open for eligible employers to register or in some cases to certify their exemption. The next big date, the next big milestone to really keep in mind and really highlight on your calendars is October 15th. That is the deadline by which employers either have to facilitate this program, or if they've received a notice and they have a retirement plan, to go ahead and just go to the website, earnsdelaware.com, and certify that they're exempt. One of the things in bringing about this program and in bringing it to Delaware, Treasurer Davis was really determined that this not be overly burdensome on our small businesses. So we have tried to keep the tasks, the responsibilities of the employer really to the minimum. And it's really these 3 steps that you see here. These are the 3 steps the employer needs to be concerned with. They all revolve around payroll. So step 1 is to go to earnsdelaware.com, go ahead and register. That involves submitting information about the business, but also the employees. That information on the employees is then used by the program administrator to create retirement savings accounts for the benefit of the employees. The employer does not have to create the accounts. They're not responsible for that. They just upload the information necessary. That's step 1. Step 2, and this is a very, very important point, and the employer is not in compliance until they've completed this second step. When it comes time for running payroll, they'll want to take those 5% deductions from the paycheck and remit those through the secure system set up by Vestwell, so that employees can start investing for a better future. And then the third step that employers need to be concerned with is really just around maintenance. Obviously, there will be staff turnover. People will come, people will go. It's just important as you're running payroll and you're sending in the contributions, you just make sure that stays up to date. I should say employers will receive communications making it very clear from Vestwell about changes to contribution levels or other changes that employees might make, so that the employer is not kept in the dark about that, and making it very easy for the employer. And those three steps are really it as far as the employer's obligation goes. There's much less obligation than there is with a standard employer-sponsored retirement plan. So again, the employers should not incur any cost. There's no fees associated with this, which does make it unique when it comes to retirement plans. No fees for the employers is what I mean to say, and that is, to my knowledge, unique. The other part of it, again, no out-of-pocket cost to the employers. There is no matching involved with this, so there will be no matching contributions from the employer. And then the other point just to mention is employers facilitating the EARNS program do not have plan sponsor liability. And just to sort of elaborate on that, if an employer were to offer a 401k, which again is a fantastic thing to do for employees, very beneficial, but that employer should be aware that in sponsoring the 401k, they are taking on a degree of liability. There is some liability for ensuring that the investments selected are sound, that the fee structure is appropriate, and so forth. That liability does not exist with Delaware EARNS. Again, this is administered and overseen by the Office of the State Treasurer. So that type of liability that can sometimes be associated with employer-sponsored plans does not exist for small businesses facilitating Delaware EARNS, or any employer facilitating Delaware EARNS. All right, so I want to speak now to how this will work from the employee side of things. So as I mentioned, the first step for employers, and we're encouraging employers to do it as soon as they can, go to earnsdelaware.com, go ahead and register, enter that initial information about your business or nonprofit, and then also the information requested about the employees. Again, using that information about the employees that's securely uploaded, the program administrator company, Vestwell, will create Roth IRA accounts for the employees. Vestwell, working on our behalf, on the Office of the State Treasurer's behalf, will then notify the employees that they have been enrolled in this program. So Vestwell is taking care of notification. We are not expecting employers to do that, and letting the employees know that they have kind of a 30-day window in which they can do an initial opt-out of the program if need be. Obviously, we're hoping as many folks can participate as they can, because it's really in their interest. But if they have to opt out, they have 30 days before anything happens, before any contributions would be made. And then once that 30 days has elapsed, then payroll can be run and the contributions can be taken. Now, of course, employees can opt out later. They can opt out after contributions have been taken, but it is important to note that there's this 30-day sort of holding period of window in which they can opt out. And then from then on, that's where we'll be making updates to the employees. Again, it's not on the employer to do that. We will be doing that. We'll be doing the outreach. And I should say these are standard Roth IRAs, so the contribution limits and other income associated limits apply to these, and you can see that there on the screen. Just as we have worked really hard to not make this a burden on our small businesses, on our employers here in Delaware, we've done the exact same thing on the employee, on the saver side of things. We have, if you will, created an easy path or a default path so that the correct, appropriate selections are made on the employee's behalf, on the saver's behalf, if they don't take any action. It's one of those rare situations in life where you end up with a good outcome if you kind of don't do anything. So the account gets opened up, the Roth IRA, a contribution level at 5% is set, and then the funds will go into a target date mutual fund provided by State Street Global Advisors, a very major investment house. These, you might or might not be familiar with them, but they're ideal for retirement investing. The mix of investments adjusts as the years go on based on the person's age and expected retirement at 65. So again, somebody doesn't have to figure out what adjustments they need to make to their investments. So that's why I say it's an easy path. Of course, we also want employees, savers, if they like, because employers can save into the program as well, to be clear. But anybody who's saving in the program also does have the flexibility to make their own selections. So they can change the contribution rate, for example, if 5% is too much for somebody, but they want to get that initial toehold, which we would encourage, they can set the contribution rate at 1%, or they can, of course, opt out altogether. They also have a short menu of investments to select from, and they can increase their contribution rate too. If they're in a position to save more, we absolutely encourage that. So along with this default easy path, there is the ability to modify it and customize it as preferred by the employee. I believe I've covered most of these points that you see here. One thing I do want to elaborate on is the Roth IRA, the Roth Individual Retirement Account. That's the very foundation of this program. That's where the money, the contributions will be invested on behalf of the savers, the employees. And it kind of interesting local note, the Roth IRA, as you may know, is named for our late Senator William Roth. But really, these accounts are perfect for this type of program. Number one, the Roth IRA is completely portable. So as a worker changes jobs, it'll be very easy for them to take it with them. They can leave it in Delaware EARNS, or they can very easily roll the Roth IRA over. It's as you may know, it's kind of a universal thing. So the portability is great. Secondly, we do recognize that many of the folks that are saving, investing in this program for the first time face financial challenges. And there may be urgent situations where they need to access funds. The Roth IRA makes that possible. What I mean by that is the original contributions to a Roth IRA can be withdrawn at any time with no taxes or penalties. So if you invested $100 in a Roth IRA and that $100 grew to $200 over time, at any time you could withdraw the original $100, the original contribution amount, with no taxes or penalties. Very different rules apply to the earnings, but the original $100, the principal, if you will, can be withdrawn at any time. And that brings me to the third point about a Roth IRA, is that it also offers very powerful long-term tax benefits. What I mean by that is, once somebody's had the account open for a while and they've ultimately reached retirement age, which is technically around 59 and a half, they actually would then be able to access those earnings I was talking about and be able to withdraw those completely tax-free. And that's what's so exciting about this program for us, because there is the possibility, even if somebody did not earn a lot of money during their working career, if we can reach that person early enough, if you'll help us do that, and they started saving right when they started working and then kept saving just $40 a week for their entire working year. So admittedly, a long period of time, but not a huge amount of money, $40 a week. And they got, say, an 8% average annual return, which is, a good return, but not, wouldn't be out of the ordinary. If they got an 8% return on that $40 a week, and they did it for their entire working life, by the time they were going to retire, they would be sitting on more than $500,000, which they could then withdraw completely income tax-free, federal and state income tax. So as Treasurer Davis has said, there's really the potential to profoundly change the quality of workers' lives. And that's what's so exciting about this. Want to take a moment just to speak to potential savers who are perhaps working for an employer that's not required to facilitate Delaware EARNS, or they might be self-employed, 1099 contractors, what have you. EARNS is still open to those folks, absolutely, and we encourage them to consider it. The pathway is a little bit different, but it's likewise, it's very easy. Anybody can go to anybody over 18 can go to earnsdelaware.com, and there's kind of a secondary path to open an account on your own individually, voluntarily, and then link up your bank with the account to make those contributions. So please be aware of that. Just some important points to recap for you. I focus a lot in talking about this on small businesses. Again, we see this as a great win for our small businesses, but sometimes I think I maybe lose sight of the fact that nonprofits, I want to be clear about that, nonprofits are able to benefit from this as well. And in fact are required to facilitate it if they meet those criteria. So the great nonprofit sector here in Delaware is not left out of EARNS. We encourage their participation as well. And as I say, overall, we're really expecting both, not just the employees, but employers to really embrace this program. And we're looking forward to that, and we encourage them to register as soon as possible. I should say, again, coming back to the point about this being a mandatory program, if over time there are employers who refuse to facilitate the program, there is the potential that they would face administrative penalties. So it is a mandatory program. We obviously realize that a lot of awareness needs to be done and notifications, but it is a mandatory program. And again, we see absolutely no reason why an employer would not want to facilitate this program, because again, there's no cost to the employer, no plan sponsor liability. We've done everything we can to facilitate it. So we look forward to a lot of adoption. And I think these other points we've certainly covered. So lastly, we really want you to contact us. We're looking forward to your questions right now very much, but please know that whenever you have a question, please reach out to us. EARNSdelaware.com is the website. There's tons of great information, and you can go ahead and register for the program there. There's a couple email addresses that you can see there. That first one is any service issues, either from the employer side or the employee side. Please use that email to address them. That second email address is for us here at the Treasurer's Office. So if you need us to get involved with anything, or if you have any questions for us, we're of course happy to answer those. That email will come directly to me, but it's also, in case I'm out, it also comes to colleagues, so we'll make sure to get back to you. You can also see, one thing I forgot to mention is there is already up and running a call center ready to take questions from either, as you can see, employers or savers. There's two numbers to call there. There is also, very importantly, that call center is bilingual, so any Spanish-speaking workers, any Spanish-speaking employers, they can get support in Spanish that they need. So please be aware of that. Those are the numbers. And again, my name's Ted Griffith. I'm the EARNS Program Director. And just very lastly, I do want to say that we certainly recognize, especially when it comes to small businesses, that there are a lot of challenges facing those small businesses. There's rising costs. There's the difficulty attracting and retaining qualified employees, and there's a lot of government regulations to comply with. And that's why we would really encourage you, if you're an employer, to go to earnsdelaware.com and go ahead and get registered, because again, on the cost side, there's no cost to this. It's actually a nice benefit that you're giving access to, so it will help with attraction and retention. And then thirdly, you get that October 15th deadline out of the way. You don't have to worry about it. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. We're very much looking forward to your questions.
At this time, Ted will start answering some of the questions. There's several of you have put in the Q&A. So Ted, I know you should start getting some of those questions. And we'll read them out loud so that everyone knows the question before he answers it.
Good reminder, Joanna. Yeah, so one question I'm seeing is, will this plan also be eligible for additional W-2 employees who work remotely? So good question about how remote workers are affected by this. So it really does come back to that W-2. If somebody is getting a W-2 for Delaware income tax, you know, even if they're working remotely, that person should be counted toward the 5 and should be enrolled in Delaware EARNS. If they're not getting a Delaware W-2 for income tax purposes, you know, if they're doing entirely all their work is in Maryland or Pennsylvania or wherever outside of Delaware, in other words, they should not be, they don't count. They you know what I'm trying to say. They certainly count, but they don't count toward the 5, and they shouldn't be enrolled in Delaware EARNS. And as you have specific questions, I realize once we start talking about tax things and where people work, it very quickly can get complicated. Please reach out to us at earns@delaware.gov if you need any clarification or assistance. We absolutely welcome that. See another good question here about 1099 workers. So those would be contractors who are not W-2 employees. And the question is, if somebody is a 1099 employees, is this plan available to them? The answer to that in terms of your 1099 workers is that Delaware EARNS is open to them in that sort of secondary route that I was speaking to there at the end. Anybody who, again, over 18, who's getting a 1099 and would like to save for retirement through a program that's overseen by their state treasurer, I would encourage them to go to earnsdelaware.com and kind of use that path to create their own account and make contributions through their bank account. But the 1099 workers will not be through payroll, but absolutely EARNS is open to them to individually and voluntarily enroll, and we certainly welcome that. And I've actually tested just to see how it will work, sort of tested the path of individually opening up an account with Delaware EARNS. It's very easy, so it should be very easy. And another good question here, is the automatic enrollment 5% of gross or net pay? Very good clarification there. So you'll recall that I mentioned the default contribution is 5% of the paycheck. Well, what do you mean by of the paycheck? What we mean by that is the gross amount of the paycheck. So before taxes and other things are taken out of it. These are after-tax contributions going into the Roth IRA. I should have mentioned that. And when we say 5% of the paycheck, we mean that initial amount before you start taking deductions out from it. So I hope that clarifies. Another great clarifying question asking about in the case of payroll contributions, when money is deferred, are the worker deferrals pre-tax or after tax, and in parentheses Roth, or both? And so the answer to that question is these are, in the lion's share of the cases, these are after-tax Roth contributions. Again, that's the default path. So for the vast majority of savers, this is how it's played out in other states, and I anticipate it'll be the same here in Delaware. The vast majority of savers are going to have Roth IRA accounts. The contributions are going to go in on an after-tax basis. And not to get us too into the weeds, but there are some folks who are not eligible to, from a tax standpoint, it has nothing to do with us, this is the IRS, who are not eligible to have Roth IRAs. It's gonna come up infrequently, but it will come up. In those cases, they will be able to work with Vestwell. There's a form they just have to fill out to, in effect, the technical term for it is to recharacterize the Roth IRA into a traditional IRA. In those cases, the person, depending on their, this is where we get into some of the tax trickiness. In those cases, the person might be able to take a tax deduction for that contribution, but it would not be a pre-tax on a payroll basis. So I hope that answers the question. Again, we're happy to follow up. Will there be so another really good question about the mandatory aspect of the program? Will there be any reporting requirements to ensure compliance with the 5 employees? And so you know, in other words, will you have to send in your roster of employees to the state treasurer's office saying how many employees you have? At this time, you know, we're really excited about the program, and we see it as very, very beneficial to employers, and so we think in large part compliance will take care of itself. And again, we did not want to make this onerous for employers. So there is no reporting requirement of that type for EARNS. There is a requirement if you get a notification and you have a retirement plan in place, a qualified retirement plan already in place, or if you just employ 3 people or 4 people, you still will need to go to the website and certify. It's a very streamlined, quick process, but we call it certifying that you're exempt. So you would be required to do that, but there's no submitting 5,500 forms, which is a type of form associated with qualified retirement plans or other types of documentation. We're not looking to that at this time. Again, we're hoping people will embrace it, and we don't want to make this onerous for folks. So, but good clarifying question, and thank you for that. And we sometimes also get questions about the investment choices that are available through the EARNS program. As I mentioned, it's really driven by kind of a default. So somebody will automatically be invested in a target date mutual fund. And again, this mutual fund is offered through one of the largest investment providers in the world, State Street Global Advisors. And again, it adjusts automatically. So it's a perfect default investment. But there are a few funds that a person could select from depending on what they're comfortable with. One is I think fair to say, somewhat aggressive international stock fund. Again, this is not a default, but this is something someone could actively choose. And then at the other end of the spectrum too, there's basically a savings mutual fund called a money market mutual fund, which really would just offer interest, but there would be no fluctuation in the principal. So there are some additional. So sometimes people ask us about that. Are there additional options available? And there are, but we've intentionally kept it very limited so as not to overwhelm employees. Another question that we get often, I see here: can a company with less than 5 employees register so their employees can contribute? At this time, our understanding there's some, as you might imagine, there's some legal nuances and complications behind this. We would instruct employers with fewer than 5 W-2 employees to not do that. You can certainly mention to your folks if you have 4, if 4, I should also say the 5 typically counts the owner as well. So if there were 3 employees and the owner under that 5 threshold, in that case, we'd encourage you to consider going to earnsdelaware.com and going through the route of opening your individual IRAs, but not to actually facilitate it through payroll. And there's some legal reasons for that. And we are thinking about ways we can address this, because obviously we want to bring this to as many people as possible. But at this time, the main route into EARNS is not open to those that have fewer than 5 W-2 employees. But again, the employees, it's full or part-time. So even if someone just worked a couple hours and they're getting a W-2, they should count toward the total. Another clarifying question on the contributions. What will the minimum amount for employees to contribute be when auto-enrolled? What is the minimum that an employer needs to withdraw from their pay? And appreciate the question. And again, the way this works, just in a sense to try to give people a nudge and make it work for them, we came up with 5% based on best practices in other states, 5% of the gross check as the default contribution level. However, the employee, the employer doesn't have any part in this, but the employee can change that. So what's the minimum? They could do 1%. And again, if somebody's really struggling, we recognize that, that can be a good solution. So then at least they're doing something. They're at least getting started. They can also opt out altogether. They can just go down to 0. But they could participate in the program at 1%. It doesn't allow for fractions or anything like that. But the minimum contribution could be 1%. And then the maximum really kind of is generally up to the employee and their specific tax situation. There are limits on how much you can put into an IRA that are dollar-based limits. So for this year, for 2024, this tax year, it's $7,000 would be the maximum contribution an individual could add to a Roth IRA. If you're on the wrong side of 50, as I am, you get an additional $1,000 called a catch-up contribution. So you could do $8,000. So there's kind of and again, we would love it if folks could contribute as much as they wanted, but that's by the IRS. And so that's kind of your maximum. And then again, your minimum as far as participating by the employee is 1% of the gross pay. But again, the employee, if need be, they can opt out. And then another good question, as you remember, I said that the responsibilities for the employer here are around payroll, revolve around payroll. In this situation, the person's asking if a company pays every week, will they need to log in every week and submit payroll information? And the answer to that is yes. Is every time you run payroll, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever the cadence is for your payroll, you will have to submit these contributions. Another great clarifying question to see here, which we often get: if an employer wants to offer a match, are they able to? If an employer wants to do matching contributions, can they do that in EARNS? The answer to that is no. Even if you would like to, you cannot do matching contributions. And obviously, we would love for employers to have the flexibility to match their folks' contributions. We would love that. But as you might imagine, and I don't want to bore everyone to tears with all the technicalities, there's some legal technicalities here. So there is no match allowed with Delaware EARNS. And I think that brings us back. It's a good tie-in with the discussion on the 401ks and the private sector plans. If your business is in a position to be able to match, that is tremendous. And that can be really one of the powerful things with a retirement plan is the match. Please go ahead and explore the private sector programs. Obviously, your qualified retirement plans are designed to really be driven by a match. So that's what I would say for you to consider there. Another important question regarding in specific seasonal situation with seasonal employees, and obviously there are many employers that have seasonality with their employees. So let me just read that to you and speak to this. Our business has seasonal ramp up and down. Normally we have 4 employees. Currently we have 5. How do we deal with the small business that flips to 5+ and then falls below during the year? And we do understand there will be some complexities with this program involving seasonal employees. We have tried to give employers that do have seasonal employees some flexibility. And again, happy to follow up with this offline, but the way our regulations are written is an employer has up to 120 days, calendar days, from when the employee starts working to enroll them in EARNS. And again, this is at the employer's discretion. An employer, you can enroll somebody, and in most cases, we would encourage you to do so. You can enroll somebody on that first day, just just as you normally would with other onboarding. Enroll them that first day. But if somebody is going to be with you less than 120 days, if you're sure of that, hey, we're just hiring so-and-so for the summer, they don't have to be enrolled in Delaware EARNS. So you have some flexibility. I realize it doesn't solve every issue. There might be, they're maybe not year round. They're like 180 days. In that case, they would have to be enrolled if they go over 120 days. But there is some flexibility for 120 days, not to, at the employer's discretion, not to enroll them. And we want to minimize the burden on employers, but it certainly is beneficial for folks to have that Roth IRA. If you have the capacity, even if somebody's just going to be with you for the summer, you are kind of doing them it's a good deed to kind of open a Roth IRA for them, and then they have that, and then they can contribute to it. But again, if they're under 120 days, they're not mandatory. Here's a specific question about opting out for the employees. Recall, this is mandatory for certain employers, but it is completely voluntary at the employee level. There's no requirement that employees participate, nor will we be looking at, well, not enough of your people signed up for it. That's not a thing with Delaware EARNS. So here's what the specific question is. Can the employer submit employee opt-outs along with the initial employee upload? In other words, can we save our employees the trouble of having to opt out by submitting their information with an opt-out status? A good question. The answer to that is no. So if you're an employer, I know employers want to be as helpful as they can, and naturally it's you they're going to be going to with questions. But we're here to answer the questions and to assist folks. So please give them the number to call in if they have questions. Don't feel like you have to answer the questions. We do not want you to, but perhaps more importantly for your own liability, do not be making elections on the behalf of your employees. Do not be opting them out of the program. It's very, very easy for them to do. To opt out. It's very, very easy. It's not some big rigmarole. And again, we would, if I was able to speak to your employees, I would ask them to think very hard if they can at least do 1% so they can get started on this. But but we understand that might not be possible. I understand people, they may need more than their check every pay cycle, and we definitely understand people are hurting out there. So it's very easy for the employees to opt out, but the employer should not be kind of doing that on their behalf. Another question about potentially employees kind of volunteer or individuals, I should really say, voluntarily enrolling kind of that secondary path into the EARNS program. If your business is ineligible, you said employees can join via self-enrollment. Does the employer for that person still now have the obligation to make the payroll deductions? And in my understanding would be, in that secondary voluntary path that I've been alluding to, where an individual is working for an employer that is not facilitating Delaware EARNS, is not required to facilitate Delaware EARNS, that individual can go open up the retirement account for themselves. Typically that is done through their personal bank account, their checking account. They hook that up to contribute to the Roth IRA. There might be instances, I guess it's conceivable, somebody might come to the employer and ask that a direct deposit, I've done that in the past at employers, the direct deposit go into the account, and they would have to give you those instructions. But that would really be, to my understanding, that would be talking about this path, the non-mandatory path. That would be at the employer's discretion. And for this voluntary path where an individual is opening an account with EARNS, it's really going to be driven by their, in the lion's share of cases, by their checking account. A great question. Let me just come back to it here. A scenario that we know will happen in certain cases. If an employee opts in, contributes, then opts out, what happens to their contributed funds at that time? Very insightful question. This goes back to the point that I was making of why the Roth individual retirement account is ideal for this. So what happens with, say they contributed a couple $100 and then things got tight and they couldn't contribute anymore. What happens to the money is completely up to the employee. This account is an individual retirement account, and so that means it belongs to the individual, does not belong to the employer. It certainly does not belong to the state. The state could never, access these funds. So if the person wants to leave the money in, they can do that. They can keep it growing. If they want to move the Roth IRA account out of the EARNS program and roll that Roth IRA somewhere else, they can do that. Or they can say, hey, I actually need all that money back, and they can pull it out if they like. So what happens to it is completely up to the individual who owns the IRA, and that's always the case with IRAs. Another nice thing that I should have mentioned from the employer standpoint is one of the great things about EARNS is the employers don't have to really keep track of folks after they move on. In other words, if you set up a 401k and somebody has a 401k account in your employer-sponsored plan, there is some obligation to, like, as they move on, to, like, you have this account. How do you make sure that you're able to stay in contact, or your administrator, your third-party administrator, is able to stay in contact with this person after they've left your employ? That is not a thing with Delaware EARNS. That is something that we will do. Employees can just leave it in Delaware EARNS if they like, or roll it over, and we will be keeping track of them. So hope that helps. And a really good multi-part question here that I want to share. How will you reach out to employees? We have several employees that do not use email. Will you be sending them information through regular mail? Will your office offer literature for the employer to share with employees? So let me take those questions in order. So when you upload information about, if you're an employer and you upload information about your employees, if there is no email address provided, you've just provided the individual's personal residence, then yes, a letter will go out to that person. So that, the fact that they don't have email doesn't mean that they won't receive notification. So letters will go out through the regular mail. The question about literature being available, again, we don't want this to be a burden on employers to educate folks, but I know the reality is, of course, they're going to come to you with questions. Please direct them to call us. But if you would like to, you can print stuff out from the website. Right now, if you go to earnsdelaware.com, down at the bottom, there's some really nice actual PDF fact sheets that are very easy to print out. One is from the employer standpoint. So if you're the employer, kind of gives you a quick overview. The other one can be shared with savers, with individuals. So you could, if you like, you can print those out. And as you kind of drill down into the website, in the employer section, there are some great, some other PDF forms that can be shared with employees. Once you've done the automatic enrollment, you can share these forms, these PDFs with the employees that explains the automatic enrollment process to them. And that's available both in English and Spanish. So there are certainly materials right now at earnsdelaware.com to help with this. You know, here in the treasurer's office, we absolutely look forward to doing outreach. I used to work as a financial advisor, generally advising, you know, higher net worth individuals. I really am looking forward to taking all that I learned and sharing that with folks that maybe haven't had a chance to do that. So we will be doing outreach to employees, but there's that's kind of something we'll have to do over time, but there's already material available. Great. And another clarifying question about when employees would need to be enrolled in Delaware EARNS. This year, the deadline is October 15th, but moving forward, is this an immediate benefit for all new employees, or can employers implement a training period before updating the system? For example, we often have workers who are with us, only with us a few months, and they may or may not remain. Do we need to update the system as soon as they start and then again when they leave? And yeah, I want to come back to that. It's kind of a twist on the seasonal question that we were asking earlier. And you'll recall that the deadline for employers to either register or certify their exemption with Delaware EARNS is this coming October 15th. So about 3 months from today, a little less than 3 months from today. Go to DelawareEARNS.com and either register or certify your exempt. This person very logically asked, well, what happens after we get past October 15th? Obviously, businesses, people are coming and going. In that case, the way it will work once we get past October 15th, in that case, there is some discretion for the employer. And this is what I was speaking to earlier, is if you like, if you're the employer and it makes it easy on you, and you want to just every time somebody starts, just to get it out of the way, you enroll them, that's fine. If you feel like, hey, this person is you know, we don't know, or by design, this person is going to be with us less than 120 days, you do not have to enroll that person. So it's the 120 days where it becomes kind of a mandatory thing. If they are in your employ for 120 calendar days, you know, once they go over that, you do need to go ahead and enroll them. So that's the key number. On the flip side, you don't necessarily have to keep track of, like, it's not like you have to add them on when they hit 120 days. If it's easier for you just to add them when they first start, please go ahead and do that. Again, it's to their benefit. But if somebody's by design just going to be with you for the summer, or if it's a situation where you know, a certain number of employees drop out before they hit 120 days, that's a typical thing. Should be fine to not enroll them. But again, if it kind of goes against your expectations and they're still with you, they're still doing well, after that 120 days, you have to go ahead and enroll them then. And also part of that question was, you know, do we, the employer, have to update the system when people leave? And I would say only in a very minimal way in terms of updates. It's just, obviously, you just would not be remitting contributions from them. You would just be updating the roster of who you're doing the contributions for. But again, you don't have to track down the person once they leave your employee to say, hey, what do you want to do with your Roth IRA? You're completely off the hook there. Here's another important question. What constitutes 5 employees? Is there a more formal definition? And there certainly is. If you go to our statute, you can review that. You can see the exact language of what constitutes a covered employer, a covered employee. You can also you can find on our web very easily the technical regulations. To make this easy for folks, I really I try to just give the shorthand. If somebody is a W-2, if you're giving them a W-2 for Delaware state income tax, they count towards that 5. If you are paying them on a 1099 basis, they do not count for that 5. So that's sort of trying to simplify it. But if you're curious, you can absolutely go and review the statute, review the regulations. I would say, by way of formalities, the key thing is what it says in the law is wages allocable to Delaware. So in other words, if you're subject to Delaware income tax, that person will generally count. Great questions, and happy to. I know we're a little bit over time. Happy to continue answering questions. And as I say, please reach out to us at any time. You can go to that. The website is up and running now, earnsdelaware.com. You have the call center numbers. You have the email address there. You can also reach us in the Treasurer's Office, earnsdelaware.gov. Just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Could a payroll provider be linked to this program that once an employee is paid, the contribution files are sent to DE EARNS team to distribute to employees properly? Yeah, so if I understanding the question, if you're an employer and you work closely with a payroll provider, can they basically help you in administering this program? The answer to that, if I'm understanding correctly, is absolutely yes. So the registration process, if you're an employer, you go to earnsdelaware.com, you put in your EIN, you'll put in a registration code specific to your EIN, which you should receive a notification of, but you can also get through the website if you haven't yet received it. And then once you've done that initial registration, you should very easily be able to, in effect, delegate this to a payroll provider to help doing it. So I hope that answers the question regarding payroll. If not, please follow up. We're happy to pursue it further. Another great question regarding payroll. How are deductions made when we have a payroll processing company like ADP? And I think as people probably know, ADP is one of the major payroll processors. And what the question is alluding to there, again, and here we're getting into some technicality, so want to try to state this as correctly as I can, but if not, we can follow up with the program administrator. My understanding is in the case of the ADP provider, there is not so-called full integration with the payroll systems, with ADP and with the EARNS systems. Now that sounds like a big deal. There's not full integration. You're not fully integrated. I have seen in the pilot, I was able to see employers sign up for this program, be able to see them do it firsthand. And even in the case of ADP, what the absence of full integration means is there's just another step where you have to go back into the EARNS system and enter the contribution. So there is one additional payroll step if there's not this so-called full integration. But again, based on the experience of the pilot participants, based on the experience of literally hundreds of thousands of employers in other states and country throughout the country, that has not been an issue. But if you are having trouble with your payroll provider, if need be, we can certainly get involved in that. Another good question from the employee's standpoint. Is it possible for a new employee to roll another Roth IRA from a previous employer into this one? So typically, somebody would not have a Roth IRA at another employer. You could have a Roth 401k generally. I mean, when we get into the tax stuff, there's always exceptions. So please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But the essence of the question is, if somebody has Roth savings, can they roll it into Delaware EARNS? Absolutely. Certainly, we welcome that. It's not mandatory, but we certainly welcome that. If you have Roth dollars elsewhere, I think there's a lot of argument to be made for consolidating in Delaware EARNS Roth IRA, so you don't lose track of it. Again, there can be some tax complications, but in principle, that will be allowed. Another question from the employer standpoint. You'll recall that I mentioned in order for employers to register, they provide their EIN, which obviously they know, but then there's one thing they don't know, which is their access code. It has to be provided to them. So will we receive our access code shortly? If it is sent via email, who at the company receives it? Great question. So we began the notification process probably about a week ago. We did open up for employer registration on July 1, but obviously July 4th holiday, we didn't send everything out. We didn't send anything out that first week. We didn't want it getting lost in the holiday. So starting the week following July 4th, notifications began to go out to employers either by email or mail, letting them know about the program and also providing that notification code. As far as who gets it at the employer, it's really driven by our colleagues at the Delaware Department of Labor. Were very helpful to us in sharing information about employers here in Delaware. So it was whatever was on file with the Department of Labor. In many cases, it's going to be a physical letter because that's how DOL has, Delaware Department of Labor has traditionally operated. In some cases, it may be an email that was on file with DOL. But as far as who it would go to, it would obviously really depend on the situation. And so I guess an obvious corollary to that question is, well, hey, I didn't get the registration code. You know, am I out of luck? And the answer to that is no. You can, even absent the registration code, if you're an employer and you meet that criteria I was mentioning, please go to earnsdelaware.com. There's a link where you can put in your EIN and it will tell you what your registration code is. So that's available. And then, you know, obviously we're just getting started with this program. So we may unfortunately have missed your business and it may not have yet been assigned a registration code. If it comes back that you don't have a registration code, you can simply you just call the 800 number. Very quick process. They will just go through a quick process, a form, and create a registration code for you that they will follow up and make sure you get. So if you haven't gotten that registration code, you know, please don't worry. You're not shut out of this. As I mentioned, really, if you just go to the website, there'll be a path to getting the employer registration code. And just looking through the questions here, bear with me for a moment. A question about just back on seasonal employees. Are seasonal employees accounted for the purposes of meeting the 5 minimum employee threshold? Really, our interpretation of the regulations is if somebody is with you less than 120 days, so that's the key number. If somebody's with you less than 120 days, they don't have to be enrolled, and they don't have to count towards the threshold. That's our That's how we see the regulations there. So again, it's that 120 days. That's the key number. Question about the Roth IRA specifically. This is a technical question. Since this is set up as a Roth IRA, are there income limits for employees to be able to participate? It's a good question. I don't have the income limits in front of me right now, so I don't want to quote them to you, but yes. So this is a Roth IRA. This is a typical Roth IRA. So all of the laws and IRS regulations that apply to Roth IRAs apply here. And just so everybody's aware of what we're talking about, and again, this is in the eyes of the IRS. This is not our doing. But if you make over certain amounts as a single filer or as a filing jointly, if you make over certain thresholds and they get adjusted every year, you are not eligible to have a Roth IRA. The IRS says you're not eligible to have a Roth IRA. So, well, you know, what happens if I have a Roth, you open up a Roth IRA for me in Delaware EARNS, and then I get to the end of the year, it was a great year, and all of a sudden I'm over the income limit and not eligible for the Roth IRA. That is not a problem. As you can imagine, that comes up all the time with these Roth IRAs all over the country. There is a simple form that is just used to use the technical term, recharacterize the Roth IRA to be a traditional IRA. And not to bore everyone to tears with all the rules, but there's some rules around who's eligible to have a deductible IRA, a tax deductible IRA, which is kind of the traditional IRA. But as far as so person might not be eligible for that. If that's the case, that's again, it's still fine. Anybody, regardless of income, can have a non-deductible traditional IRA. So really the answer is if somebody turns out not to be qualified for a Roth IRA, there's a form, it's already available on the website. You just use that to recharacterize. And again, the IRS understands this. It happens all the time because it's driven by your income in that tax year, which obviously you can't know until the end of the year and really filling it out. I think we may be on our last question. Thank you so much for great questions, and thank you for bearing with us. As I say, please follow up with us. I do see another question here. How will an employer know if an employee has opted out? So employers, as they're going through this process, as I mentioned, this company Vestwell has this really refined to a science. So there will be notifications every payroll cycle to the employer to let them know about changes. Somebody has changed their contribution level or someone has opted out. So again, the employer does not have to dig in and figure that out. They will be notified that on a very regular basis by Vestwell. I've seen the interface myself. It's very clear when the employer is in the employer Vestwell interface, very clear that changes have been made. So should be simple. And I think that may bring us to our last question. And again, as I say, really appreciate this. We're very excited about this as an opportunity for both employers and employees. And I know you're bound to have questions as we go forward. We're looking forward to addressing those. So please reach out to us, and please, the call center is already up and running. So please make use of that. Please work with us on Delaware EARNS. We're excited about everything that it can do for the state. And one more question. This was actually a point. There are some nuances with this that I didn't have a chance to cover. But I should also say, going back to the default contribution. So again, 5% of the gross check every payroll cycle. The program is also designed so that the level of contribution increases by 1 percentage point each year. So after the person's been enrolled in the program, say they were at 5%, it gets nudged up to 6%. And again, this sounds out of the ordinary, like automatic escalation of their contributions. This is the best practice in retirement planning now. I worked for many years for a big mutual fund company that specializes in retirement. This has emerged as best practice in retirement planning, the so-called auto escalation. Again, it's really about giving people a nudge to save more, so their contribution would automatically be raised by 1 percentage point a year. But again, this is voluntary. So if they don't want to if they want to keep with 5 or take it down to 1 or opt out, they can do that. So it would sort of automatically escalate for them. But if that's not right for them, they can opt out of that piece of it. And then there's probably or baked into this question, the auto escalation of 1% per year, is that up to what? 10%, 15%? Obviously, you wouldn't want to have the thing auto escalate all the way up to 100% of the person's pay or 30, some kind of craziness. It is capped at 10%. It is capped at 10%, which obviously it'll take us some years before we're hitting that. But no one will be, no matter how many years they're in the program, and again, the longer you're in it, the more beneficial it is. But nobody will be auto escalated to more than 10% of their gross check. And again, it'll happen just at 1 point per year, starting at 5, and then over that 5 years could auto escalate if the person's okay with it up to 10%. So thank you for that final question there. Good clarification. There's great information on the website. There are some more details. I think we've covered a lot of them, but there's great detail on the EARNSDelaware.com. And again, we're grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much. Thank you again.